Selfish millionaire betrays pregnant black girlfriend. 19 years later, she gets ultimate revenge. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories. A new, beautiful tale awaits you, filled with wonder and excitement. Don't miss out. Subscribe now and join us on this magical journey. The Miami sun cast long shadows across Brickell Avenue as Rose Clark stepped out of his gleaming black Bentley. At 42, he commanded attention without effort, his tailored Tom Ford suit and carefully styled salt and pepper hair marking him as someone who belonged among the city's elite. Yet, despite his outward success, an emptiness echoed through the marble halls of his penthouse each night, a void no amount of wealth seemed able to fill. That spring morning in 2005 began like any other, with Rose reviewing property portfolios and acquisition reports in his corner office on the 48th floor of the Clark Enterprise building. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Biscayne Bay, but he hardly noticed anymore. Success had become routine, predictable, until his assistant called in sick and the temporary replacement got his coffee order wrong. Irritated but unwilling to make a scene, Rose decided to visit the small cafe across the street, a place he'd passed 1,000 times but never entered. The bell above the door chimed as he pushed it open, and that's when he first saw her, Xanthi Divine, 18 years old and radiant with a joy that seemed to illuminate the entire room. She stood behind the counter, dark curls escaping from her messy bun, her brown skin glowing under the warm cafe lights. Her name tag was slightly crooked, and she had a small smudge of flour on her cheek. When she smiled at him, Rose felt something he hadn't experienced in years: butterflies. "Welcome to Sunshine Cafe!" Her voice carried a musical lilt that made even such a simple greeting sound like the beginning of a song. "What can I get for you today?" Rose found himself stammering slightly, an unfamiliar sensation for a man who regularly commanded boardrooms. Just a black coffee, please. Medium roast." Xanthi tilted her head slightly, studying him with curious eyes that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed facade. "Are you sure? You look more like a caramel macchiato kind of person to me." The unexpected observation startled a genuine laugh from him, his first in months. "Do I? And what makes you say that?" "Well," she said, already reaching for the espresso machine, "you walked in here looking like you carry the weight of the world on those expensive shoulders. Sometimes we need something sweet to remind us life isn't all about business deals and bottom lines." She winked, and Rose felt his carefully constructed world shift slightly on its axis. Against his usual instincts, he accepted her suggestion, watching as she crafted his drink with an artist's attention to detail. Her movements were graceful, precise, and when she handed him the drink, their fingers brushed momentarily. The contact sent an electric current through his body that had nothing to do with caffeine. "Try it," she encouraged, her dark eyes twinkling with anticipation. "If you don't like it, I'll make you that black coffee. On the house." Rose took a sip and was immediately transported back to childhood memories of Sunday mornings with his grandmother, the sweet and bitter notes perfectly balanced. "This is incredible," he admitted, surprised by his own reaction. "Sometimes the best things in life come when we're willing to try something new," Xanthi replied, and in that moment Rose knew he would find any excuse to return to this cafe, to see this girl whose smile seemed to chase away the shadows that had accumulated around his heart. He began coming in every morning, always during Xanthi's shift. Their conversation started small: weather, coffee preferences, harmless observations about the regulars who frequented the cafe. But gradually, they deepened. He learned about her dreams of becoming an artist, how she painted late into the night after her shifts ended. She told him about growing up in Liberty City with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to give her daughter a chance at a better life. Xanthi shared her thoughts without reservation or calculation. A refreshing change from the carefully crafted conversations Rose was used to in his social circle. She spoke of colors and emotions with such vivid intensity that he found himself seeing the world differently through her eyes. One rainy afternoon, when the cafe was nearly empty, she showed him some of her sketches, quick captures of customers, street scenes, and moments of daily life that somehow managed to convey not just images, but emotions. Among them was a portrait of him from that first day, looking simultaneously powerful and lost. The accuracy of her perception startled him. "You saw all that?" "Even then," he asked, touching the paper gently. "Sometimes we see people more clearly when they don't think anyone's looking," she replied softly. "You came in here wearing success like armor, but your eyes, they were searching for something else entirely." The honesty in her observation touched something deep within him. Before he could stop himself, he asked her to dinner. The moment the words left his mouth, he realized how inappropriate it might seem, their age difference, their different backgrounds, the potential complications. But Xanthi's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "I thought you'd never ask," she said, and the simple authenticity of her response washed away his doubts. Their first date was at a small Cuban restaurant in Little Havana, far from the upscale establishments where Rose usually dined. Xanthi wore a simple yellow sundress that seemed to capture sunlight, her natural beauty outshining any designer outfit he'd seen at society gatherings. They sat at a cramped table with a wobbly leg, ate ropa vieja and plantains, and talked until the owner had to politely ask them to leave because they were closing. Walking along Calle Ocho afterward, the humid Miami night air thick with the scent of coffee and cigars, Rose felt younger than he had in years. Xanthi's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his naturally, as if they'd always belonged there. When she pointed out the beauty in things he'd never noticed, the way neon signs reflected in puddles, the rhythm of Latin music spilling from open doorways, the pattern of stars visible despite the city lights, he began to see Miami through new eyes. Their worlds should have been incompatible, but somehow they weren't. Xanthi's genuine nature and artistic soul brought color to his monochrome existence, while his experience and resources helped her explore opportunities she'd never thought possible. He sponsored her first art show in a small Wynwood gallery, watching with pride as she charmed potential buyers with her passionate explanations of each piece. The age difference that had initially concerned him became insignificant in the face of their growing connection. Xanthi's youth wasn't about naivety, it was about hope, about seeing possibility where others saw limitations. She approached life with a wisdom that surpassed her years, while her presence reminded Rose of dreams he'd abandoned in his pursuit of success. As spring turned to summer, they created their own routines. Sunday mornings were spent at small breakfast joints in historic Coconut Grove, followed by walks through the Vizcaya Gardens, where Xanthi would sketch while Rose read the papers. Weekday evenings often found them on his penthouse balcony, sharing takeout while watching the sunset over the city they were both coming to see differently because of each other. Rose found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, about his childhood in foster homes, about building his company from nothing, about the loneliness of success. Xanthi listened without judgment, offering perspectives that helped him heal old wounds he didn't even know were still open. One evening, as they walked along South Beach under a full moon, Xanthi stopped suddenly and turned to face him. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked, her bare feet leaving prints in the sand, her hair wild from the ocean breeze. "I never did before," Rose admitted, drawing her closer. "I always thought we make our own destiny through hard work and determination. But meeting you, sometimes it feels like the universe conspired to bring us together." Xanthi smiled, reaching up to touch his face gently. "Maybe it's both. Maybe we work hard to be ready for the moments fate has planned for us. When he kissed her under that moon, with the Atlantic waves providing their soundtrack, Rose Clark, the man who planned everything, who calculated every risk, who had built an empire on careful decisions, felt himself falling freely and willingly into something that defied calculation or control. Their love story became the talk of Miami, though not always kindly. Society whispered about the age difference, about his possible motivations, about her supposed fortune hunting, but in the cocoon of their relationship, none of that seemed to matter. Xanthi's authenticity deflected criticism, while Rose's deep devotion was obvious to anyone who saw them together. Those first 3 months were a renaissance for both of them. Rose rediscovered joy in simple pleasures: art galleries, street festivals, impromptu dance lessons in Little Havana. Xanthi's art flourished with access to better materials and opportunities, her natural talent enhanced by the stability Rose's support provided. Neither of them could have predicted how their story would evolve, how the pure love of these early days would be tested by circumstances and choices yet to come. But in that magical Miami spring, two souls who should never have crossed paths found in each other something rare and precious, a love that promised to bridge any divide, to heal any wound, to light up even the darkest corners of their lives. As May turned to June, and their love deepened with each passing day, Rose Clark, the man who had everything, finally understood what true wealth felt like. It wasn't in his bank accounts or his real estate portfolio. It was in the way Xanthi's eyes lit up when she saw him, in her uninhibited laugh, in the quiet moments when they simply held each other and watched the city lights twinkle like earthbound stars. They were an unlikely pair, the self-made millionaire and the teenage artist from Liberty City. But in those golden days of new love, they created their own reality. One where age was just a number and background just a story, where love was the only currency that truly mattered. Their future stretched before them like the Miami horizon, full of promise and possibility, yet to be touched by the shadows that waited in the wings. Little did they know that their fairy tale was about to face its first test, one that would either strengthen their bond or shatter it completely. But for now, in this perfect moment of new love, they were simply Rose and Xanthi, two hearts beating in sync under the endless Florida sky. Chapter 2. Paradise Lost. The Miami summer blazed on, but for Rose and Xanthi, the heat was nothing compared to the warmth they found in each other's arms. July brought with it the kind of sticky evenings that sent most of the city's elite retreating to air-conditioned sanctuaries. But the lovers found magic in these tropical nights. They would often escape to Rose's private beach house in Key Biscayne, where the ocean breeze carried their laughter across moonlit waters. It was on one such evening that their world shifted. Xanthi had been quiet during dinner, pushing her favorite key lime pie around the plate instead of devouring it with her usual enthusiasm. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled slightly. "Rose, I need to tell you something." The candlelight flickered across her face, highlighting the mixture of fear and joy in her eyes. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the salt-laden air between them. Rose's crystal wine glass froze halfway to his lips, the red liquid catching the light like liquid rubies. For a moment that stretched into eternity, the only sound was the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. Then, to Xanthi's surprise and delight, Rose's face broke into a smile that seemed to illuminate the entire terrace. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, dropping to his knees beside her chair. "A baby." His voice was thick with emotion. "Our baby?" Xanthi nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks as Rose gathered her into his arms. They stayed that way for what felt like hours. Planning and dreaming, Rose spoke of converting his home office into a nursery, of the schools their child would attend, of the legacy they would build together. Xanthi painted pictures with her words of teaching their little one to draw, of family picnics in the park, of tiny hands and first steps. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of joy. Rose insisted on moving Xanthi into his penthouse, transforming the stark, modern space with her colourful artwork and bohemian touches. He hired the city's best obstetrician and showered her with gifts, organic baby products, designer maternity clothes, and a custom-made easel that could be adjusted as her belly grew. But as summer faded into fall, subtle changes began to creep into their paradise. It started with whispers at Rose's country club, sideways glances from business associates, and pointed questions from his board of directors about the company's image. Rose found himself fielding calls from concerned investors, some subtly and others not so subtly suggesting that his relationship with a pregnant teenager might impact their confidence in his judgment. Miranda White entered their story on a Wednesday afternoon during a charity gala at the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens. She was everything Xanthi wasn't: polished, sophisticated, and most importantly to Rose's social circle, from the right background. As the daughter of one of Miami's oldest families, Miranda moved through high society with the ease of someone born to it. At first, Miranda's interest in Rose's company seemed purely professional. Her family's investment firm was looking to diversify its portfolio, and Clark Enterprises represented an attractive opportunity. The meetings were frequent but necessary, or so Rose told himself. He didn't mention them to Xanthi, convincing himself it was to avoid stressing her during the pregnancy. Meanwhile, Xanthi's world began to shrink. As her belly grew, she found herself spending more time alone in the penthouse. Rose's late nights at the office became more frequent, his excuses more elaborate. When he was home, his phone buzzed constantly with messages he would check with furrowed brows, turning away from her questioning gaze. The first real crack in their foundation appeared during what should have been a joyous occasion, their baby's gender reveal party. Rose had insisted on hosting it at the exclusive Fisher Island Club, where Miami's elite gathered to celebrate. Xanthi, now 5 months pregnant, wore a flowing white dress that emphasized her growing belly. She should have been the center of attention, but instead found herself increasingly isolated as Rose worked the room with Miranda White mysteriously by his side. "You must be so grateful," Miranda said to Xanthi during a rare moment when they were alone, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Not many girls from Liberty City end up with such an opportunity." The emphasis she placed on the last word made it clear what she really meant, that Xanthi was lucky to have trapped a wealthy man. That night, for the first time, Xanthi and Rose truly fought. "She was practically hanging on your arm the entire evening," Xanthi cried, her artistic hands gesturing wildly. "And you didn't even notice how she was treating me." "Miranda is an important business contact," Rose replied, his voice taking on the cold, professional tone he'd never used with her before. "And perhaps, if you made more of an effort to fit in with my social circle, these events wouldn't be so difficult for you." The words hung between them like poisoned darts, and though Rose immediately tried to take them back, the damage was done. That night, Xanthi cried herself to sleep while Rose sat in his home office, staring at a text from Miranda. "You deserve someone who understands your world." As Xanthi's pregnancy progressed, the distance between them grew. Rose's transformation was subtle but steady. Each day he seemed to drift further from the man who had fallen in love with an artistic soul in a small cafe. The pressures of his world, the whispers of his peers, and Miranda's constant presence began to reshape him into someone Xanthi barely recognized. 7 months into the pregnancy, Xanthi discovered the truth. It came in the form of a forgotten phone, a message preview that flashed across the screen. "Last night was incredible. When can I see you again?" The sender's name, Miranda, burned itself into Xanthi's retinas. The confrontation that followed was devastating in its quietness. There were no screaming matches, no thrown objects. Just Xanthi, standing in their bedroom with tears streaming down her face, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other holding out the phone like an accusation. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Rose's silence was answer enough. When he finally spoke, his words were careful, measured, as if he were handling a difficult business negotiation. "We need to be realistic about this situation, Xanthi. You're 19, I'm 42. We come from different worlds. Perhaps this was all a beautiful dream, but dreams must end." "A dream?" Xanthi's laugh was hollow. "Is that what you call this? Our love? Our baby? Just a dream?" But Rose had already retreated behind the walls of his corporate persona, the man who made difficult decisions for the greater good. "I'll ensure you're both taken care of course. There will be a generous settlement." "Stop!" Xanthi's voice cracked like a whip. "I don't want your money. I want the man I fell in love with, the one who saw me, really saw me, that day in the cafe. What happened to him?" The question hung in the air between them, but Rose had no answer. The truth was too complicated, too tied up in societal expectations, business pressures, and his own deep-seated fears of vulnerability. Instead, he turned away, unable to face the pure hurt in Xanthi's eyes. The final act of their love story played out in Rose's office, 9 months into the pregnancy. Xanthi had come to return the keys to the penthouse, to make a final plea for the man she loved to remember himself. Instead, she found him in a meeting with Miranda and several board members. What happened next would be burned into the memories of everyone present. Rose, caught off guard and feeling cornered, did the unthinkable. He dismissed Xanthi as a gold digger, a naive girl who had tried to trap him. He did it publicly, cruelly, with Miranda smirking by his side and his board members nodding in approval. Xanthi stood there, one hand protectively cradling her belly, the other gripping the doorframe for support. In that moment, she transformed from a girl into a woman, from a lover into a survivor. Without a word, she turned and walked away, her head held high despite the tears streaming down her face. That night, alone in her mother's small apartment in Liberty City, Xanthi went into labor. As she brought their daughter into the world, Rose was celebrating his engagement to Miranda at a gala event, trying to convince himself that he had made the right choice for everyone involved. But in the quiet hours of that Miami night, as Xanthi held their newborn daughter and watched the city lights twinkle through her hospital window, she made a promise. This betrayal would not break her. She would rise above it, stronger and wiser, and she would give her daughter the kind of love that didn't come with conditions or social expectations. Little did Rose know that his actions had set in motion a chain of events that would eventually come full circle. His daughter would grow up to be both his greatest joy and his most painful reminder of the choices he made that summer when love wasn't enough to bridge the gap between two worlds. As Miami's autumn finally cooled the summer heat, two hearts that had once beaten as one now went their separate ways. Rose retreated into his world of wealth and privilege, while Xanthi began her journey as a single mother, carrying with her the lessons of a love that had burned too bright and ended too soon. But this wasn't the end of their story. It was merely the beginning of a much longer tale of redemption, revenge, and the possibility of forgiveness. Chapter 3. Rising from the Ashes. The first cry of her newborn daughter shattered the quiet of Miami-Jackson Memorial Hospital's delivery room at exactly 3:17 a.m. Outside, the city slept beneath a blanket of stars, unaware that a child who would one day shake its very foundations had just entered the world. Xanthi Divine, exhausted but radiant, reached out trembling arms to hold her daughter for the first time. "Elysia," she whispered, the name she'd chosen months ago finally finding its owner. Elysia Hope Divine. The baby, as if recognizing her name, opened her eyes that were unmistakably her father's, though Xanthi prayed they would hold more kindness than his had shown in the end. In that moment, as she counted tiny fingers and toes, memorized the curve of her daughter's nose and the bow of her perfect lips, Xanthi felt something shift inside her. The broken pieces of her heart began to reform, not around the memory of Rose Clark, but around this new, pure love that filled every corner of her being. Her mother, Sandra Divine, stood watch like a sentinel, her weathered hands steady as she stroked her daughter's hair. "You are stronger than you know, baby girl," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "Both of you are." The first few weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Xanthi and Elysia settled into a tiny room in Sandra's apartment, where the walls were thin enough to hear the salsa music from their neighbors and the ceiling sometimes leaked during Miami's afternoon thunderstorms. But it was home, filled with more love than any penthouse could ever contain. Friends who had urged her to terminate the pregnancy now brought hand-me-down baby clothes and home-cooked meals. The community rallied around them. The elderly Cuban lady downstairs, who offered to watch Elysia while Xanthi showered, the Haitian family next door who left containers of soup outside their door, the teenage boys from the corner store who carried their groceries up 3 flights of stairs without being asked. But love and support, while sustaining the soul, couldn't pay the bills. 3 weeks after giving birth, Xanthi stood before her easel again, painting commissioned pieces between Elysia's naps. She took online classes while nursing, her laptop balanced precariously on the arm of a second-hand rocking chair. During the day, she worked at a local gallery, Elysia strapped to her chest in a baby carrier, tiny hands occasionally reaching out to touch the colorful canvases. The gallery owner, an elderly woman named Ms. Rosa, had known Xanthi since she was a child, drawing with sidewalk chalk outside her mother's workplace. Now she watched with pride as the young mother juggled her responsibilities with grace beyond her years. "You remind me of a phoenix," Ms. Rosa told her one day as Xanthi arranged a new exhibition while humming a lullaby to a sleeping Elysia. "Rising from the ashes, more beautiful and powerful than before." Those words became a mantra for Xanthi during the hardest days. When Elysia was teething and wouldn't sleep, when her art wouldn't sell, when she passed boutiques displaying clothes she could no longer afford, when she saw Rose's face on business magazines at the grocery store checkout. She never cashed the checks he sent. They arrived monthly, each one representing what he thought would ease his conscience. Xanthi stored them in a box under her bed, a growing collection of paper guilt that she couldn't bring herself to destroy but refused to accept. As Elysia grew, so did Xanthi's determination. She completed her online business courses with honors, learning the language of the world that had once seemed so foreign to her. During the day, she managed the gallery. At night, she painted and studied, often falling asleep with textbooks spread across her bed and paint still drying on her fingers. Elysia's first word was "Mama," spoken on a Sunday morning as sunlight streamed through their small window. Her first steps were taken in the gallery, tottering between sculptures as patrons watched with indulgent smiles. Her first drawing, a mess of crayon scribbles, earned a place of honor on the gallery wall, displayed proudly alongside works worth thousands. Time moved forward, marking itself in Elysia's growth and Xanthi's achievements. The little girl's features slowly refined themselves, showing hints of both her parents, Rose's determined jaw, Xanthi's artistic hands, a unique blend of their coloring that made her striking even as a toddler. She inherited her mother's creativity and her father's sharp mind, though Xanthi prayed the latter would be used with more wisdom than Rose had shown. When Elysia was 3, Xanthi's hard work began to pay off. Her paintings started attracting serious attention in Miami's art scene. Her unique style, combining classical techniques with contemporary urban influences, resonating with collectors. She opened a small account with her earnings, separate from Rose's untouched checks, building her own safety net $1 at a time. The gallery promoted her to manager and then partner when Ms. Rosa decided to semi-retire. Under Xanthi's guidance, the space transformed from a quiet local venue to a respected showcase for emerging artists. She had an eye for talent and a gift for marketing, combining her artistic sensibility with her hard-won business knowledge. But success brought its own challenges. As her name began appearing in local art publications, she knew it was only a matter of time before Rose became aware of her achievements. The Miami art world was small, and though she'd kept her head down for years, her work was beginning to demand attention. The moment came during Art Basel, when Xanthi was 31 and Elysia was 12. One of her paintings, a haunting piece depicting a pregnant woman standing alone on a beach at sunset, was selected for display at a prestigious satellite event. The morning after the opening, her name appeared in the Miami Herald's art section, accompanied by a photo of her standing proudly beside her work. She saw him before he saw her, his familiar figure moving through the crowd at her gallery the following week. Rose had aged well, his hair now fully silver, but his presence still commanding. He stopped dead when he saw her painting, recognition flickering across his face as he took in the subject matter. But Xanthi was no longer the naive teenager he'd known. Years of single motherhood had forged her into steel, tempering her artistic spirit with unshakable strength. She approached him with the confidence of a woman who had built herself from scratch, who owed nothing to anyone. "Mr. Clark," she said coolly, using the formal name he'd once begged her to abandon. "Welcome to Divine Gallery. How may I assist you today?" The look of shock on his face was almost worth all the years of struggle. Almost, but not quite. "Xanthi," he breathed, his voice catching. I've been following your work, under the radar. You've become quite successful." "I have," she replied simply, neither accepting his implicit praise nor acknowledging his surveillance. "Was there a particular piece you were interested in?" He gestured helplessly at the painting before them, the pregnant woman on the beach, her face turned away, but her solitude palpable. "This one, it's us, isn't it?" "No," Xanthi corrected him gently but firmly. "It's me. There was never really an us, was there? Not when it truly mattered." Before he could respond, a voice called out from the gallery's office. "Mom, Miss Rosa's on the phone about the new installation." Elysia appeared in the doorway, a spitting image of her mother at that age, but with unmistakable echoes of Rose in her bearing and features. She stopped short at the sight of the stranger who was staring at her with undisguised recognition and longing. Rose took an involuntary step forward, but Xanthi's voice stopped him cold. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll be right there." The message was clear. He had no right to this moment, no claim to the daughter he'd abandoned before she was born. As Elysia disappeared back into the office, Rose turned to Xanthi with tears in his eyes. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She looks so much like me," Xanthi finished firmly. "She looks like me. And she is beautiful, inside and out, because she was raised with love that didn't come with conditions or social requirements." The words hung between them like a verdict. Rose opened his mouth to speak again, but Xanthi held up a hand to stop him. "The painting is already sold," she said professionally, though they both knew that wasn't what he wanted to discuss. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a business to run and a daughter to raise. Good day, Mr. Clark." She turned and walked away, her head held high, her step sure and steady. Behind her, she heard him call out softly, "I'm sorry, Xanthi, for everything." But she didn't turn back. She had learned long ago that some apologies come too late, and some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. Instead, She went to her daughter, pulled her close, and breathed in the scent of her hair, a mixture of coconut shampoo and the oil paints she'd been experimenting with lately. "Who was that man, Mom?" Alicia asked, curiosity bright in her eyes. His eyes. Xanthi kissed her daughter's forehead, grateful for the millionth time that this beautiful soul had come from such pain. "Just someone from the past, baby. Someone who reminded me how lucky we are to have each other." That night, as Miami's lights twinkled outside their comfortable apartment, so different from the tiny room they'd started in, Xanthi finally took out the box of uncashed checks. One by one, she fed them into the shredder, releasing the last threads that bound her to Rose Clark. She didn't need his money anymore. She had built something far more valuable, a life of her own making, a successful business, and most importantly, a relationship with her daughter, based on unconditional love and unwavering presence. As she watched the paper strips fall, Xanthi felt the last weight lift from her shoulders. She was ready for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that she had not just survived, but thrived. And somewhere in the city, Rose Clark was beginning to understand exactly what he had thrown away all those years ago. Chapter 4. The Truth. Unfolded. At 18, Alicia Devine stood before her bedroom mirror, studying the features she'd inherited from both parents, features that had become increasingly familiar since she'd discovered the truth about her father. Her mother's artistic sensibility had blessed her with a natural grace, while Rose Clark's genes had given her his commanding presence and shrewd intelligence. But it was the perfect blend of both that made her uniquely equipped for what she was about to do. The discovery had come 2 years earlier, on a rainy afternoon when she was helping her grandmother clean out the attic. Behind a stack of old canvases, she'd found a box filled with newspaper clippings, photographs, and a worn journal. Inside were the pieces of a story her mother had kept hidden for 16 years. The photographs told a tale of young love, her mother, radiant and barely 18, wrapped in the arms of a distinguished-looking man she recognized from business magazines. Rose Clark, Miami's real estate mogul, the man whose buildings punctuated the skyline of their city. Her father. Alicia had spent that night reading her mother's journal, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed the beautiful beginning and tragic end of their love story. The entries stopped abruptly after his public rejection, but resumed a few months later, now filled with determined plans for the future and beautiful letters written to her unborn child. "My dearest Alicia," one entry read, "today you kicked for the first time. I want you to know that you were born from love, even if that love didn't last. You are not a mistake or a tragedy. You are my masterpiece, my reason for becoming stronger, my greatest joy." That night changed everything. Alicia began researching her father obsessively, learning everything she could about Clark Enterprises, its structure, its weaknesses. She studied business journals, corporate reports, and social media posts. She learned that his marriage to Miranda White had lasted barely 5 years before ending in a costly divorce, that he had no other children, that his company had grown into one of Miami's largest real estate development firms. More importantly, she learned about his vulnerabilities. Rose Clark was a man obsessed with his public image, a man who had built his empire not just on smart investments, but on carefully cultivated relationships with Miami's elite. His reputation was everything. The plan formed slowly, methodically. Alicia applied herself with renewed vigor to her studies, graduating high school at the top of her class. She took advanced business courses at the local community college, absorbing everything she could about corporate structure and management. In the evenings, she helped her mother run the gallery, learning the art of negotiation and people management from a master. Her mother noticed the changes in her but attributed them to normal teenage development. Xanthi was busy with the gallery's expansion, having finally achieved enough success to open a second location in Wynwood. She didn't notice how her daughter's questions about business became increasingly specific, or how she spent hours studying the corporate architecture of Miami's biggest companies. On her 18th birthday, Elysia made her move. She applied for an entry-level position at Clark Enterprises using her mother's maiden name. Her resume was impeccable, perfect grades, relevant experience, managing her mother's gallery, glowing recommendations from her professors. But it was during the interview that she truly shone. Rose Clark himself conducted the final interview, a practice he maintained for all positions that would work directly with senior management. He sat across from her in his corner office, unaware that he was looking into eyes that mirrored his own. "Ms. Devine," he said, reviewing her resume, "your qualifications are impressive for someone so young. Why Clark Enterprises?" Elysia smiled, channeling all of her mother's grace and her own carefully honed determination. "I believe in building things that last, Mr. Clark, in creating legacies that stand the test of time. Your company has shaped Miami's skyline. I want to be part of shaping its future." Something in her voice made him look up sharply, but she had already schooled her features into professional interest. She watched as he struggled with a sense of familiarity he couldn't quite place, saw the moment he dismissed it as imagination. She got the job. The next 6 months were a masterclass in patience and strategy. Elysia proved herself exceptional at every task, quickly earning promotions and trust. She worked longer hours than anyone, learned every aspect of the business, and made herself indispensable, all while gathering information, building relationships with key board members, and laying the groundwork for her revelation. Rose began to mentor her personally, impressed by her quick mind and dedication. He took her to business meetings, taught her the intricacies of real estate development, even invited her to social events where she charmed his colleagues and investors. All the while she was her mother's daughter, observing, learning, planning. In the evenings, she returned to their home above the gallery, carrying the weight of her secret. Sometimes, watching her mother paint late into the night, she almost told her everything. But she knew Xanthi would try to stop her, would worry about the toll this deception might take on her daughter's soul. "You seem different lately," Xanthi observed one night, her hands covered in paint as she worked on a new piece. "Preoccupied." Elysia smiled, kissing her mother's cheek carefully to avoid the paint. "Just focused on the future, Mom. You taught me to chase my dreams with everything I have. Just don't forget to live in the present while you're chasing those dreams," Xanthi advised, not knowing how prophetic her words would prove. The opportunity for revelation came sooner than Elysia had planned. Clark Enterprises was hosting the annual Miami Business Leader Summit, a prestigious event attended by the city's most powerful figures. Rose had asked her to prepare a presentation on their newest development project. Standing backstage before her presentation, Elysia touched the locket she always wore. Inside was a tiny photo of her mother, pregnant and glowing, standing on the beach at sunset, the same scene from the painting that had caught Rose's attention years ago. She began her presentation normally, showcasing the company's achievements and future plans. Rose watched from the front row, beaming with pride at his protégé. Then, halfway through, she changed course. "Before I continue," she said, her voice steady, "I'd like to share a different kind of development story. One about a man who built an empire on the foundation of a broken promise, who traded true love for social acceptance, who abandoned his pregnant teenage girlfriend because she didn't fit into his perfect world." The room fell silent as she clicked to the next slide, a photograph of young Xanthi and Rose laughing together on South Beach. "This is my mother," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence, "and this is my father." Rose stood up abruptly, his face draining of color as understanding dawned. But Elysia wasn't finished. She proceeded to lay out the entire story, supported by documentation she'd gathered, the press clippings of their relationship, the evidence of his affair with Miranda, the uncashed checks he'd sent over the years. "For 18 years, my mother never cashed a single check," she announced, her voice thick with emotion. "She built herself up from nothing, raised me with more love than most children of privilege ever know, and created her own success story, while you, Father, lived with the guilt of your choices." The whispers began, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Miami's elite watched in fascination as their perfect world cracked, revealing the ugly truth beneath the polished surface. Rose finally found his voice. "Security!" he called out, but his command was met with resistance from the very board members he'd thought were his allies. They had grown to respect Elysia over the months, and more importantly, they recognized a potential PR disaster when they saw one. "Let her finish, Rose," Bernard Matthews, his senior board member, said firmly. "I think we all need to hear this." Elysia continued, her voice growing stronger. "I didn't come here for revenge, though God knows you deserve it. I came here to show you exactly what you threw away, to make you understand that your perfect world, built on the pain of others, isn't as solid as you think." She clicked to the final slide, a recent photo of her and Xanthi at the gallery opening, both of them radiant with success and happiness. "This is what real legacy looks like, not buildings or bank accounts, but love that persists despite betrayal, strength that grows from pain, and truth that refuses to stay buried." The room erupted in chaos as she finished. Reporters who had come to cover a standard business event found themselves with the story of the year. Society ladies who had once snubbed young Xanthi now whispered behind their hands, their perfect world shaken by this revelation. Rose stood frozen, staring at his daughter, truly seeing her for the first time. In her face, he saw the perfect blend of himself and Xanthi, the living proof of a love he'd sacrificed for appearance's sake. He took a step toward her, reaching out, but she stepped back. "Don't," she said firmly. "You lost the right to act as my father the day you chose your reputation over your heart. I'll see you in court, Mr. Clark. I have evidence of your attempts to bribe me to keep quiet, and believe me, that's just the beginning." As she walked off the stage, head held high, just as her mother had done so many years ago, the whispers followed her. But unlike Xanthi's solitary walk away from Rose's office, Elysia's exit was one of triumph. She had exposed the truth, shaken the foundations of her father's carefully constructed world, and most importantly, she had done it on her own terms. That night, as Miami's social media exploded with the story, Elysia finally told her mother everything. They sat on their balcony sharing a bottle of wine, while the city lights twinkled below them like earthbound stars. "I should be angry that you put yourself through this," Xanthi said softly, "but I'm just in awe of your strength. You truly are the best of both of us." Elysia squeezed her mother's hand. "I learned from the best. You showed me that real strength isn't about power or money. It's about staying true to yourself, no matter what." As they sat together, mother and daughter, the wind carried the scent of jasmine from their rooftop garden. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal battles, media attention, the full weight of their truth being public. But for now, they had this moment of perfect understanding, of shared triumph. And somewhere in his penthouse office, Rose Clark stood at his window, looking out at the city he thought he owned, finally understanding that his greatest achievement and his greatest failure were one and the same. The daughter he'd never known, who had just brought his carefully constructed world crashing down around him. Chapter 5. The Price of Truth. The morning after Elysia's revelation dawned with an unusual chill for Miami. The city awoke to find its social landscape irrevocably altered. The story splashed across every local newspaper and trending on social media. Miami mogul's secret daughter exposes decades-old betrayal, screamed the headlines, accompanied by side-by-side photos of young Xanthi and Elysia at the same age, their resemblance undeniable. Rose Clark sat in his darkened office, surrounded by the morning papers, each one carrying a different angle of his humiliation. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since the previous evening, calls from board members, investors, reporters, and society friends. He'd answered none of them. Instead, he sat there, holding the one photograph he'd kept hidden in his desk for 19 years. A sonogram image from Xanthi's pregnancy, the only picture he had of his unborn daughter. Across town, the Divine Gallery was surrounded by reporters. Xanthi and Elysia watched from their apartment above, sipping coffee in companionable silence. The morning light caught the silver threads in Xanthi's dark hair, earned through years of single motherhood and hard work. "Are you ready for this?" Xanthi asked, watching her daughter's reflection in the window. Elysia straightened her shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of Rose that it made Xanthi's heart ache. "I've been ready for this my whole life, Mom. I just didn't know it until now." Their lawyer, Patricia Rodriguez, arrived precisely at 9, navigating through the media circus with practiced ease. She'd known Xanthi for years, having helped her establish the gallery's legal framework. Now she spread documents across their dining table, her expression serious. "The evidence you've gathered is compelling," Patricia said, reviewing Elysia's meticulously organized files. "The attempted bribery, the documented history of abandonment, the proof of his knowledge of your existence. It's all here. But are you sure you want to pursue this publicly? There are other ways to handle it. The public way is the only way," Elysia replied firmly. "He built his empire on reputation and appearances. That's his weakness, and that's where we'll hit him." At Clark Enterprises, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. Rose sat at the head of the table, looking older than his years, as Bernard Matthews read out the latest financial projections. "3 major investors have already pulled out," Bernard reported grimly. "Our stock has dropped 15% since opening bell. The Miami Heritage Foundation is reconsidering our contract for the downtown revitalization project. And that's just the beginning." "It's not about the money," Rose said quietly, surprising everyone. It never was. Miranda White chose that moment to make her entrance, stilettos clicking against the marble floor. Though they'd been divorced for years, she still held significant shares in the company. "Well, isn't this deliciously ironic?" she drawled, taking in the scene. "The great Rose Clark, brought low by the very girl he threw away along with her mother. I warned you, your past would catch up with you eventually." Rose's response surprised them all. He stood slowly, his voice steady. "Get out, Miranda. You've done enough damage. In fact," he turned to his legal team, "prepare to buy back her shares, whatever the cost." The next few weeks unfolded like a high-stakes chess game. Elysia's legal team filed suits for emotional damages and back-child support, while Rose's lawyers scrambled to contain the fallout. But it was the court of public opinion that proved most brutal. Miami's social circles, once Rose's strongest support, now buzzed with whispered conversations and shifted allegiances. Many who had snubbed Xanthi years ago now sought her out, praising her strength and determination. The Divine Gallery saw unprecedented traffic, though Xanthi knew many visitors came more for gossip than art. Elysia continued working at Clark Enterprises, protected by whistleblower laws and her own growing influence within the company. She handled the attention with grace, neither gloating nor backing down. Her colleagues, initially awkward around her, soon found themselves admiring her professionalism and quiet strength. The turning point came during a charity gala at the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, ironically the same venue where Rose had first begun his affair with Miranda. Rose arrived alone, while Elysia attended with her mother, The whispers reached a crescendo as the three found themselves in the same room for the first time since the revelation. It was Xanthi who made the first move, approaching Rose with the same quiet dignity she'd maintained all these years. "You look tired," she said simply. Rose aged visibly as he looked at her. "Xanthi, you're as beautiful as ever." "Save the compliments," she replied, but without bitterness. "We need to talk, all three of us. Not here, not now, but soon. This needs to end, Rose. Not for your sake or mine, but for her." She nodded toward Alicia, who stood across the room, commanding attention just by existing. Later that week, they met in the private room of a small Cuban restaurant in Little Havana, the same one where Rose and Xanthi had had their first date 20 years ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. "I've been trying to figure out what to say," Rose began, his voice rough with emotion, "how to apologize for 20 years of mistakes, but everything sounds hollow." "Because it is hollow," Alicia cut in. "Words can't undo what you did. Actions might, but are you capable of those?" Rose pulled out a thick envelope and placed it on the table. Both women stiffened, expecting another attempt at financial settlement. But when he opened it, they saw papers of a different kind. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Clark Enterprises," he announced, "and I'm transferring 30% of my shares to Alicia, not as a bribe or a settlement, but as her rightful inheritance, the inheritance she should have had from the beginning." Silence fell over the table. Finally, Xanthi spoke. "Why now?" "Because I finally understand what I lost," Rose replied, his voice breaking. "Not just the chance to be a father, but the chance to be the man you believed I could be, Xanthi. The man who fell in love with an artist in a coffee shop and didn't care what anyone thought." Alicia studied him carefully. "And what do you want in return?" "A chance," he said simply. "Not forgiveness. I haven't earned that yet. Just a chance to try to make amends, to get to know my daughter, to apologize properly to her mother, to spend whatever years I have left trying to become worthy of the family I threw away." The legal battles ended quietly after that night. The shares were transferred, statements were issued, and the media gradually lost interest as newer scandals emerged. But the real work was just beginning. Rose began therapy, confronting the deep-seated fears and insecurities that had led him to choose status over love. Alicia allowed him to take small steps toward being part of her life. Weekly lunches, occasional business consultations, carefully bounded interactions that slowly built trust. Xanthi watched it all with cautious optimism, her artist's eye seeing the subtle changes in both father and daughter. She had her own healing to do, her own peace to make with the past. But as she worked on a new series of paintings, this time exploring themes of forgiveness and redemption, she found herself remembering the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. One evening, nearly a year after the revelation, the three of them stood on the balcony of the Divine Gallery's new rooftop installation space. Below them, Miami's lights twinkled like stars fallen to earth. Artists and collectors mingled around Xanthi's latest works, including a triptych that told their story in abstract forms and powerful colors. "I still remember the first time I saw you paint," Rose said softly to Xanthi. "You made me see the world differently." "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm learning to see everything differently," he replied, glancing at Alicia. "Including myself." Alicia leaned against the railing, looking out over the city that had witnessed their entire story. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "someone once told me that true legacy isn't about buildings or bank accounts. It's about the truth we leave behind, the lives we touch, the love we choose to give or withhold." Rose nodded, understanding the reference to her speech that had changed everything. "Who do you think you got that wisdom from?" he asked. "From both of you," Alicia replied. "From Mum, I learned about unconditional love and unwavering strength. And from you, well, I learned what happens when we let fear override our hearts. Both lessons were valuable. As they stood there, this unlikely family united by truth and torn apart by choices, Miami's evening breeze carried the scent of jasmine and new possibilities. None of them harbored illusions about perfect endings or complete healing, but they had something perhaps more valuable: the chance to write a new chapter, one based on truth rather than appearances, on genuine effort rather than easy solutions. The past couldn't be changed, but the future stretched before them, as vast and full of potential as the city skyline. And this time they would face it together, each carrying their own lessons, their own scars, and their own hopes for redemption. Chapter 6. Painting New Horizons. 2 years after the revelation that shook Miami's social foundations, the Divine Gallery prepared for its most ambitious exhibition yet. Generations, Love, Loss, and Legacy would feature works by both Xanthi and Alicia, marking the first time mother and daughter had exhibited together. The show represented more than just art. It was a public declaration of their journey, their healing, and their triumph. Alicia, now 20, had discovered her own artistic voice while maintaining her role at Clark Enterprises. Her paintings combined her mother's emotional depth with a sharp contemporary edge that reflected her business acumen. She painted in the early mornings before work, just as Xanthi had done during those struggling years of single motherhood. The gallery's new location in the heart of the design district hummed with activity as final preparations were made for opening night. Xanthi stood before her centerpiece, a massive canvas that dominated the main wall. Titled Redemption, it depicted 3 figures on a beach at sunset: a woman, a man, and a young girl, their shadows stretching long behind them, intertwining in complex patterns that spoke of past pain and future possibilities. "It's beautiful, Mom," Alicia said softly, joining her. "You've captured everything, the pain, the healing, the hope." Xanthi squeezed her daughter's hand. "Your father's coming tonight." The words no longer carried the weight they once had. Rose's presence in their lives had evolved gradually over the past 2 years, shifting from tension-filled encounters to something approaching comfortable familiarity. He'd kept his word about making amends, showing up consistently but never pushing, learning to respect boundaries while slowly earning trust. "I know," Alicia replied. "He asked me to have coffee with him this morning. He wanted to see my new series before anyone else." The memory of that morning's meeting hung fresh in her mind. They'd sat in a small cafe, not the one where her parents' story had begun, but similar in its quiet intimacy. Rose had aged gracefully into his role as chairman emeritus of Clark Enterprises, the silver in his hair now completely natural, the lines around his eyes speaking more of earned wisdom than corporate stress. "Your work is extraordinary," he'd told her, studying photographs of her pieces on her tablet. "You've inherited your mother's gift for capturing emotions, but you've made it entirely your own." "I learned from the best," she'd replied, then added softly, "both of them." The acknowledgement had brought tears to his eyes, something that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago, the great Rose Clark crying openly in a public cafe over his daughter's words. Now, as evening approached and the gallery staff made final adjustments to the lighting, Xanthi found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Her own healing had been perhaps the most surprising part of the past 2 years. The revelation had forced her to confront feelings she'd buried beneath 2 decades of focused single motherhood. Working with her therapist, she'd finally allowed herself to grieve not just for the love she'd lost, but for the young girl she'd been, forced to grow up too fast. Rose had respected her process, never pushing for more than she was willing to give. Their interactions, initially focused solely on Alicia, had gradually evolved into something that, while not friendship exactly, carried its own kind of peace. The gallery began filling with Miami's art crowd promptly at 7. Among them were faces from all chapters of their story: Ms. Rosa, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever; Patricia Rodriguez, who'd handled their legal battles and become a close friend; even Bernard Matthews, who'd stood by Elysia during the tumultuous days after her revelation at Clark Enterprises. Miranda White was notably absent, having finally sold her shares in the company and moved to New York the previous year. Her departure had lifted a subtle tension none of them had fully acknowledged until it was gone. Rose arrived exactly on time, impeccably dressed, but carrying himself with a new humility that suited him better than his old corporate armor. He navigated the crowd carefully, stopping to admire each piece, giving them the attention they deserved rather than treating the event as another social obligation. The exhibition was arranged chronologically, beginning with Xanthi's earlier works from her struggling years as a single mother. These led into Elysia's first pieces, created during her time of discovery and revelation. The final room held their newest works, created over the past year, pieces that spoke of healing, understanding, and the complex nature of forgiveness. Critics moved through the space, murmuring appreciatively at the technical skill and emotional depth displayed in both artists' work. But it was the story behind the art that captured everyone's attention. The journey from betrayal to revelation to redemption, told through color and form by the women who had lived it. Halfway through the evening, Elysia clinked her glass for attention. The crowd quieted, turning toward the young woman who had become known for more than just her dramatic revelation of 2 years ago. "Art, like life, is about transformation," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the gallery. "It's about taking raw materials, pain, joy, loss, love, and creating something meaningful from them. Tonight's exhibition is more than just a collection of paintings. It's a testament to the power of truth, the possibility of redemption, and the strength of the human heart." She paused, looking at her parents, Xanthi, radiant in a dress that matched the deep blues of her newest works, and Rose, standing respectfully apart, but undeniably present. "2 years ago, I thought revenge would heal old wounds. I was wrong. The real healing began when we all started painting new pictures of what family could mean, what forgiveness could look like, what love could survive." Rose stepped forward then, something in his hand. "If I may," he said, looking to both women for permission before continuing. From his pocket, he withdrew a small, weathered sketchbook. "This belonged to your mother," he told Elysia, though everyone in the room could hear. "She left it behind that day. I've kept it all these years, never having the courage to return it or throw it away. Inside are her sketches of us, of the future she imagined, of the love we shared before I let fear overwhelm it." Xanthi's breath caught as she recognized the book. She'd thought it lost forever, along with so many other dreams from that time. "I'm returning it now," Rose continued, "not to dwell on the past, but to acknowledge it fully. Every chapter of our story deserves to be remembered. The beautiful beginning, the painful middle, and now perhaps a wiser ending." The sketchbook passed from his hands to Elysia's, and then to Xanthi's. As she opened it, pages of memories fluttered free. Quick sketches of a younger Rose laughing, studies for paintings never completed, dreams of a family drawn in swift, confident strokes. The moment could have been awkward, this public acknowledgement of private pain, but somehow it wasn't. Instead, it felt like the closing of a circle, the final piece of their story falling into place. Later that night, after the crowds had gone and the gallery grew quiet, the three of them found themselves together in front of Xanthi's Redemption. The painting seemed to glow in the dimmed lighting, the intertwined shadows of its figures dancing with new meaning. "I never thought we'd be here," Xanthi admitted softly, standing together, looking at this, looking forward instead of back. "We're not the same people we were," Rose replied. "Maybe that's what real redemption is, not trying to fix the past, but becoming people who would make different choices now." Alicia studied the painting, her artist's eye catching details others might miss. "The shadows in your painting, Mom, they're not just about the past, are they? They're reaching towards something." Xanthi nodded. "The future, always the future. That's what I've tried to teach you since you were little. We can acknowledge the past without letting it define us." As they stood there, this unconventional family united by art and transformed by truth, Miami's nighttime skyline twinkled through the gallery's windows. The city that had witnessed their entire story now stood as backdrop to its latest chapter. None of them harbored illusions about perfect endings. Life was too complex, pain too real, healing too ongoing for that. But they had something perhaps more valuable, the understanding that love, like art, could be reimagined, reframed and recreated, as long as the heart remained open to new possibilities. The exhibition would run for 6 weeks, telling their story to all who came to see it. But the real masterpiece wasn't hanging on any wall. It was in the 3 people standing before it, each changed by their journey, each contributing to a new picture of what family could mean. Chapter 7. Legacy of Love. 1 year after the groundbreaking Generations exhibition, Miami's landscape had shifted in ways none of them could have predicted. The Divine Gallery had become more than just an art space. It was now a sanctuary for healing through creativity, a place where stories of redemption and reconciliation found their voice through color and form. Alicia, at 21, had grown into a role she never expected. Beyond her position as the youngest board member at Clark Enterprises and her flourishing artistic career, she had become a symbol of hope for others struggling with family trauma and identity. Her story had inspired a movement in Miami's art community, encouraging truth-telling through creative expression. On a warm autumn evening, she stood before a packed audience at the University of Miami's art department, delivering a guest lecture that went far beyond technique and style. "Art isn't just about creating beauty," she told the eager faces before her. "It's about creating truth. Sometimes that truth is painful, sometimes it's healing, but it's always transformative." In the back of the lecture hall, Xanthi and Rose sat together, not touching but comfortable in their proximity, a hard-won peace that had taken years to achieve. They watched their daughter command the room with a presence that borrowed from both of them, but remained uniquely her own. The Divine Gallery had expanded again, this time with a purpose beyond exhibition space. The new wing, funded jointly by Rose's Foundation and the gallery's proceeds, housed the New Horizons program, an initiative providing art therapy and business mentorship to young single parents and their children. Xanthi had found her own unexpected path to healing through teaching. Twice a week, she led workshops for program participants, sharing not just artistic techniques, but the hard-earned wisdom of her journey. Her students ranged from teenage mothers to middle-aged fathers, reconnecting with estranged children, each finding their voice through creativity. "Sometimes the canvas knows what we need to say before we do," she often told them, echoing words she'd discovered in her own journey of healing through art. Rose, too, had undergone a transformation that surprised many who had known him in his corporate warrior days. While maintaining his role as chairman emeritus of Clark Enterprises, he had redirected much of his energy toward the foundation he had established to support arts education and family reconciliation programs. The 3 of them had found a rhythm in their relationships, not the conventional family dynamic they might have had, but something perhaps more valuable for being chosen rather than assumed. They met for Sunday brunches at the small Cuban restaurant where Rose and Xanthi had first dated, now owned by the original owner's daughter who treated them like family. One such Sunday, as they shared plates of ropa vieja and discussed plans for the foundation's latest initiative, a young woman approached their table. She was visibly pregnant and couldn't have been more than 18, around Xanthi's age when her own story began. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said nervously, "but I had to thank you, all of you. Your story. It gave me courage. My parents kicked me out when they found out I was pregnant, but after attending Ms. Divine's workshops at the gallery, I found strength I didn't know I had. And now," she smiled tremulously, "now they're coming to my next ultrasound appointment. They said your family's story made them rethink everything." After she left, Alicia reached across the table and took both her parents' hands, a gesture that would have been impossible 3 years ago. "That's the real legacy, isn't it? Not the buildings or the paintings or the foundation, but the lives we touch by sharing our truth." The impact of their story rippled out in other ways too. Rose's example had influenced other corporate leaders to examine their own relationships and priorities. Several had established similar programs supporting arts education and family counseling. The Miami Business Leaders Summit, where Alicia had made her dramatic revelation years ago, now included sessions on corporate social responsibility and work-life balance. Miranda White had unexpectedly reached out from New York, sending a lengthy email that surprised them all. She expressed remorse for her role in the past events and shared that watching their journey toward reconciliation had inspired her to repair relationships in her own life. While they weren't ready to welcome her back into their circle, the acknowledgement added another layer to their healing. The Divine Gallery's annual Truth in Art exhibition became a cornerstone event in Miami's cultural calendar. It featured works not just from established artists, but from participants in the New Horizons program, each piece telling its own story of struggle, resilience, and hope. During that year's exhibition opening, Elysia unveiled a new series titled Threads of Time. The centerpiece was a triptych showing 3 versions of the same scene, a family on the beach. The first panel showed the past, young Xanthi alone and pregnant facing the sunset. The second depicted the present, all 3 of them standing together but slightly apart, their shadows reaching toward each other. The final panel offered a vision of possibility, the 3 of them fully connected, their combined shadow forming a pattern that looked remarkably like a heart. "Art has the power to reimagine reality," Elysia explained to the gathered crowd. "Not to deny the past, but to create new possibilities for the future. Every stroke of paint, every choice of color, every composition decision is an act of hope." Rose had tears in his eyes as he studied the triptych. "You've captured everything," he said softly. "The pain, the healing, the possibility." Xanthi, standing nearby, added, "And the love." Despite everything, there was always love. The New Horizons program continued to grow, with satellite locations opening in underprivileged neighborhoods throughout Miami. Each location combined art therapy with practical support, legal advice, business mentorship, educational resources. The program became a model for similar initiatives across the country. One evening, as sunset painted Miami's sky in colors that reminded Xanthi of her early paintings, the 3 of them sat on the gallery's rooftop garden. The space had become their favorite spot for family meetings, the peaceful atmosphere encouraging honest conversation. "I've been thinking about legacy," Rose said, watching the sky's colors shift. "Not the kind I used to worry about, buildings and business empires, but the kind that matters, the kind that changes lives." Elysia, sketching the sunset in her ever-present notebook, looked up. "What kind is that?" "The kind you 2 taught me about," he replied. Legacy isn't what we leave behind in banks or buildings. It's what we leave in people's hearts. It's the courage we give others to face their own truths, the hope we offer that healing is possible. Xanthi, who had been quietly painting at her easel, turned to face them. On her canvas, she had captured this very moment, 3 people on a rooftop, their figures distinct but connected, the sunset behind them casting a glow that made everything look new. "That's what art does," she said, gesturing to her painting. "It shows us what's possible. It helps us see the beauty in the broken places, the hope in the hard stories." As night fell over Miami, the city lights began to twinkle like earthbound stars. The Divine Gallery below them hummed with activity. Another workshop in session, more stories being transformed into art, more lives being touched by the ripples of their journey. They had created something remarkable, not just a reconciled family or a successful business or even a healing program, but a testament to the power of truth, creativity, and love to transform even the deepest wounds into sources of light for others. Their story had become part of Miami's fabric, woven into its culture and consciousness. But more importantly, it had become a beacon of hope, showing others that it's never too late to rewrite your story, to heal old wounds, to create something beautiful from pain. As they sat together in the growing darkness, surrounded by the garden Alicia had planted to remind us that beautiful things grow from difficult ground, they understood that their journey wasn't over. There would always be more truth to tell, more healing to embrace, more love to discover. But now they faced it together, 3 artists painting new possibilities on the canvas of their shared future. Their combined legacy reaching far beyond themselves to touch countless other lives with the power of truth, creativity, and unconditional love. Chapter 8. Full Circle. 5 years had passed since the founding of the New Horizons program, and Miami had blossomed into a different city. The Divine Gallery, now a sprawling arts complex in the heart of the design district, had become a landmark not just for art lovers, but for anyone seeking inspiration and healing. Alicia, now 26, stood in front of the gallery's original location, which had been transformed into a museum dedicated to stories of redemption and reconciliation. Her own story was just one among many now, though it remained the catalyst that had started this movement of healing through art. She was no longer just Rose Clark's secret daughter or Xanthi Devine's artistic heir. She had become her own force in Miami's business and art worlds. As CEO of the Clark Devine Foundation, she had merged her father's business acumen with her mother's artistic vision to create something entirely new. The Foundation's latest project was her most ambitious yet, the opening of the Divine Institute of Arts and Healing, a fully accredited college offering programs in fine arts, art therapy, and business management for creative entrepreneurs. The Institute's mission was to nurture both artistic talent and emotional intelligence, preparing students to use their creativity as a force for positive change. On the morning of the Institute's opening ceremony, Alicia found herself in the small cafe where her parents' story had begun. The original owner had passed away, but his granddaughter had preserved its character while adding subtle touches that honored its place in their family history. A mural on one wall depicted their story in abstract forms, painted by students from the New Horizons program. "I thought I'd find you here." Xanthi's voice came from behind her. At 45, Xanthi had grown more beautiful with age, her artist's soul shining through eyes that had seen both struggle and triumph. She still painted every day, but her work had evolved to explore themes of generational healing and collective memory. "Just needed a moment," Alicia replied, sipping from a caramel macchiato, her father's favorite, though she'd never told him that. "Sometimes I can't believe how far we've come." Rose joined them shortly after, moving more slowly now at 68, but carrying himself with the quiet dignity he'd earned through years of making amends. The three of them sat at what had become their regular table, sharing memories and dreams as the morning light streamed through the windows. "I received another letter yesterday," Xanthi said, pulling an envelope from her bag. "A young woman from Chicago. She read about our story in the Institute. Her father abandoned her mother 20 years ago, and after seeing our foundation's work, he reached out to reconnect. These stories had become common over the years. Their journey had sparked a movement of reconciliation that extended far beyond Miami's borders. The Clark Divine Foundation now had partner programs in cities across the country, each adapting their model of combining artistic expression with emotional healing. The Institute's opening ceremony drew hundreds of people from around the world. Artists, educators, business leaders, and families touched by their story gathered in the grand auditorium. The building itself was a work of art, its architecture incorporating elements from both the Divine Gallery's aesthetic and the classic lines of Clark Enterprise buildings, a physical representation of their merged legacies. Elysia took the stage to deliver the opening address, her presence commanding yet warm. 26 years ago, she began, a young artist and a successful businessman fell in love in a small cafe not far from here. Their story, my parents' story, could have ended in bitterness and regret. Instead, through years of hard work, courage, and the transformative power of art, it became a testament to the possibility of healing. In the front row, Rose and Xanthi sat together, their hands not quite touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. Their relationship had evolved into something unique, not quite friends, more than former lovers, bound together by their shared love for their daughter and their commitment to helping others heal. The Divine Institute, Elysia continued, is more than just a school. It's a promise to future generations that pain can be transformed into purpose, that trauma can become a source of wisdom, that love can survive even the deepest betrayals if we're brave enough to face our truth and do the work of healing. The Institute's first class included students from all walks of life, young single parents, children of broken homes, successful professionals seeking to heal family rifts, artists wanting to use their talents for social change. Each carried their own story of pain or hope, each drawn to this place where art and healing intersected. Among them was a young man named Marcus, whose story particularly touched them all. He was the son of Miranda White, sent with his mother's blessing to study at the Institute as part of her own journey of redemption. His presence represented another layer of healing in their complex family story. The day's events included the unveiling of a collaborative installation created by students from the New Horizons program. Titled Generations, it featured thousands of small mirrors arranged in a spiral pattern, each reflecting a different photograph or piece of artwork representing stories of family reconciliation. At its center hung the original painting that had started it all, Xanthi's pregnant self-portrait on the beach. As evening fell, the three of them found themselves in the Institute's rooftop garden, a space designed to echo the gallery's original rooftop where they had first begun to heal as a family. Miami's skyline stretched before them, dotted with buildings bearing both the Clark and Divine names, some dedicated to business, others to art, all now serving a greater purpose. "I've been working on something," Xanthi said, leading them to a covered canvas. When she unveiled it, they gasped. The painting showed the cafe where their story began, but with a twist. The scene repeated itself through multiple windows, each showing a different moment in time. Through one window, young Rose and Xanthi shared their first coffee. Through another, Elysia made her revelation at the business summit. Through others, scenes from the gallery, the foundation, and the Institute showed the ripple effects of their journey. "It's called Love's Echo," she explained, "because that's what we've created. An echo of love that keeps expanding, touching more lives with each reverberation." Rose studied the painting with tears in his eyes. All those years I thought legacy was about buildings and bank accounts, he said softly. But this is real legacy. The lives we've touched, the healing we've inspired, the love we've put back into the world. Elysia wrapped her arms around both her parents, a gesture that had become natural over the years. "And we're just getting started," she said. "Every student who walks through these doors carries the potential to heal not just themselves but generations to come." As night fell over Miami, the Institute's lights illuminated the garden, creating a warm glow that seemed to embrace the city. Below, students and faculty mingled with community members, sharing stories and dreams. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted up to where the three of them stood, a symphony of healing in progress. They had created something extraordinary, not just a school or a foundation or even a movement, but a new way of understanding family, legacy, and love. Their story had become a beacon of hope, showing that even the deepest wounds could become wellsprings of healing for others. As they stood together in the garden they'd planted with their own hands, surrounded by the fruits of their collective journey, they understood that this was just another beginning. The ripples of their story would continue to spread, touching lives they would never know, inspiring healing they would never see. The Divine Institute stood as a testament to the power of truth, creativity, and love to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. It was their gift to the future, a promise that pain could be transformed into purpose, that broken things could be made beautiful, that love could echo across generations. And in the small cafe where it all began, a new generation of dreamers sat at worn tables, sharing hopes and fears, unknowingly writing the next chapters in an ongoing story of love, redemption, and the endless possibility of healing. Chapter 9. Seeds of Change. 10 years had passed since the Divine Institute opened its doors, and its impact had grown beyond anything its founders had imagined. What began as a Miami institution had blossomed into an international movement, with sister campuses now operating in New York, London, and Tokyo. Each location carried the spirit of the original story, while nurturing its own unique approach to healing through art. Elysia, at 31, the same age her mother had been when their truth first came to light, stood in her office at the Institute's Miami headquarters. The wall behind her desk displayed 3 photographs that told the story of their journey: her mother's pregnant self-portrait, the dramatic revelation at the business summit, and the opening ceremony of the Divine Institute. But it was the 4th frame that held her attention today, a recent family portrait that would have seemed impossible 15 years ago. The photograph showed 3 generations: Rose, now 73, but still sharp and engaged; Xanthi, whose artistic soul seemed to grow more luminous with each passing year; Elysia herself, and most remarkably, her own 1-year-old daughter, Luna Hope Clark Divine. The baby had been an unexpected blessing, conceived through artificial insemination when Elysia decided she wanted to continue their family's legacy of strong, independent women. "Your timing is perfect," came a voice from the doorway. Michael Chen, the Institute's head of international programs and Elysia's closest friend, stood there holding a stack of files. The Tokyo campus just sent over their proposal for the new Generational Healing curriculum. The curriculum was the latest evolution of their work, a comprehensive program that combined art therapy, family counseling, and business education, designed to address intergenerational trauma through creative expression. It had grown from the seeds of their family's story, but now incorporated wisdom and techniques from cultures around the world. "Any word from Marcus?" Elysia asked, referring to Miranda White's son, who had become one of their most successful graduates and now ran the London campus. "He's arriving tomorrow for the anniversary celebration," Michael confirmed. "His mother's coming too." The mention of Miranda no longer carried the sting it once had. Time and dedicated effort toward healing had transformed old wounds into wisdom. Miranda's journey from antagonist to ally had become another testament to the power of truth and reconciliation. Later that afternoon, Elysia made her way to the Divine Gallery's original location, where her mother was installing a new exhibition. Echoes of Love, A Decade of Healing would showcase works by Institute graduates alongside pieces from all three divines, Xanthi, Elysia, and even little Luna's first finger paintings. She found Xanthi standing before a wall of photographs documenting the Institute's impact over the years. Each image told a story. A father and daughter reuniting after years of estrangement, their reconciliation captured in a collaborative art piece. A young single mother graduating with honors, her child watching proudly. A corporate executive leaving his high-powered job to become an art therapist after experiencing healing through the program. "Sometimes I still can't believe what we've created," Xanthi said softly, sensing her daughter's presence. At 55, she had grown into her role as the Institute's spiritual heart, her own journey of single motherhood and artistic triumph inspiring countless others. "I was just thinking about Luna," Elysia replied, moving to stand beside her mother. "How different her world is from what yours was at her age. The legacy she's inheriting isn't just about art or business or even healing. It's about the power of truth to transform pain into purpose." Rose joined them later, arriving from a board meeting of the Clark Divine Foundation. Despite his age, he remained actively involved in their work, though he'd long since learned to balance ambition with wisdom. His relationship with Xanthi had evolved into a deep respect and shared commitment to their larger mission, while his bond with Elysia had grown stronger through their joint leadership of the foundation. "The Singapore proposal is approved," he announced, his voice carrying the satisfaction of continued growth. "Construction begins next month on their campus." The expansion into Asia had been Elysia's vision, recognizing the need for culturally sensitive approaches to family healing in different societies. Each new campus adapted their core principles while honoring local traditions and understanding regional family dynamics. The next morning brought the arrival of Marcus White, now a respected art therapist and educator. His presence at the Institute had initially raised eyebrows, but his genuine commitment to healing and his unique perspective as someone who had witnessed the damage of privilege and prejudice had proven invaluable. "The London programs are thriving," he reported during their leadership meeting. "We're seeing particular success with the intergenerational workshops, where grandparents, parents, and children create art together as part of their healing journey." The Institute's 10th anniversary celebration was more than just a commemoration. It was a testament to the transformative power of their vision. The week-long event brought together graduates, faculty, and families from around the world, each carrying stories of healing and hope. The main ceremony took place in the Institute's Grand Hall, where Elysia took the stage, carrying Luna in her arms. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, the next generation already embodying the integration of art, business, and healing that defined their legacy. 10 years ago, she began, her voice carrying the weight of history and hope. "We opened these doors with a dream born from our own family's journey of pain and healing. Today, that dream has touched thousands of lives across continents and cultures. In the front row, Rose and Xanthi sat together, their presence a living testimony to the possibility of reconciliation. Behind them, Miranda White dabbed at her eyes, her own journey of redemption having added another layer to their collective story. "But our work is far from finished," Elysia continued. "As long as there are families struggling with untold truths, as long as there are wounds waiting to be transformed into wisdom, our mission continues. The Divine Institute isn't just a school or a foundation. It's a movement, a promise that healing is possible, that art can bridge the gaps between hearts, that love can echo across generations. The celebration continued into the evening with the opening of Xanthi's exhibition. The gallery walls told countless stories of transformation: paintings, photographs, sculptures, and multimedia installations created by people whose lives had been touched by their work. In a quiet moment during the reception, Rose found himself standing before a new piece Xanthi had created specifically for the anniversary. Titled Full Circle, it showed the small cafe where their story began, but with a contemporary scene visible through its window. Alicia sitting at their old table holding Luna, while sunlight streamed through the glass, casting shadows that seemed to dance with possibility. "It's strange," he said when Xanthi joined him, "how life gives us chances to right our wrongs, if we're brave enough to take them." "Not just to right them," she replied, "but to transform them into something that helps others heal." As the celebration wound down, the 3 generations of divine women gathered in the Institute's rooftop garden, now a lush paradise that served as both a peaceful retreat and a living classroom. Luna slept peacefully in her mother's arms, while Alicia and Xanthi discussed plans for the future. "I never imagined this," Xanthi admitted, watching her granddaughter sleep. "When I was carrying you, fighting to survive as a single mother, I couldn't see past the next day. Now look at what we've built. Not just a family or an institution, but a legacy of healing that will continue long after we're gone." Alicia smiled, remembering her own journey from angry daughter seeking revenge to leader of a global movement for healing. That's the real art, isn't it? Taking the raw materials of our pain and creating something beautiful that helps others find their way to healing. As night fell over Miami, the lights of the Divine Institute illuminated the sky, a beacon of hope visible from miles away. In classrooms and studios around the world, people continued to discover the healing power of creative expression, their individual stories becoming part of a larger tapestry of transformation. The legacy of Rose, Xanthi, and Alicia had grown beyond their original vision, touching lives they would never meet, inspiring healing they would never witness. But in every brushstroke, in every reconciliation, in every moment of truth and transformation, their story lived on, a testament to the enduring power of love, creativity, and the courage to face one's truth. Little Luna stirred in her sleep, her tiny hand grasping her mother's finger. In that simple gesture lay the promise of continuation. Another generation ready to carry forward the work of healing through art. Another chapter in an ever-expanding story of love's triumph over pain, of truth's power to transform, of art's ability to heal the deepest wounds of the heart. Chapter 10. Eternal Echoes. 20 years had passed since the Divine Institute first opened its doors, and Miami had become known as much for its healing arts as its beaches and nightlife. The Clark Divine legacy had woven itself into the city's fabric, transforming not just individual lives, but the cultural landscape itself. Luna Hope Clark Divine, now 11, stood before an easel in her great-grandfather's old office at the top of what was once Clark Enterprises headquarters. The space had been transformed into a light-filled studio where 3 generations of divine women now gathered to paint, share stories, and continue their family's tradition of healing through art. Rose, at 83, sat in his favorite armchair by the window, watching his great-granddaughter work. Age had softened him further, turning the once imposing business titan into a gentle patriarch whose greatest joy came from these quiet moments with his family. Though his movements had slowed, his mind remained sharp, and his eyes still sparkled with the same intensity that had once captured young Xanthi's heart. "Tell me again about the cafe, great-grandpa," Luna requested, her brush moving confidently across the canvas. She had inherited her grandmother Xanthi's artistic gift and her mother Alicia's determination, combined with a wisdom that seemed to transcend her years. Rose smiled, settling into the familiar story. It was a small place, nothing special to most people, but the moment I walked in and saw your grandmother standing behind the counter, everything changed. She saw past all my walls, past the success and money, straight to who I really was. And then you messed it all up, Luna added matter-of-factly, making Rose chuckle despite the pain that memory still carried. Yes, I did. But that's part of our story too, how love can survive even our worst mistakes if we're brave enough to face our truth and do the work of healing. Xanthi, now 65, entered the studio carrying a tray of tea. Her hair had turned completely silver, framing a face that had grown more beautiful with the wisdom years of helping others heal had brought. She set the tray down and moved to stand behind Luna, studying her granddaughter's work. "You've captured his eyes perfectly," she said softly. Luna was painting Rose as he looked in those early days, working from old photographs and family stories. But she had added something of her own, a subtle overlay of his present-day expression, creating a portrait that somehow captured both who he had been and who he had become. Alicia joined them later, after finishing a virtual meeting with the Divine Institute's newest campus in Cape Town. At 41, she had grown into her role as the Institute's global leader, balancing the artistic sensitivity inherited from her mother with the business acumen that was her father's legacy. But her proudest achievement remained her daughter, who embodied the best of their family's journey. "The South African programs are expanding," she announced, accepting a cup of tea from her mother. "They're incorporating traditional African healing practices into our art therapy methods. Each new campus brings its own wisdom to our work." The Divine Institute had grown beyond anything they could have imagined 20 years ago. What began as one family's journey of healing had sparked a global movement, with campuses on 6 continents and programs that reached into the most remote communities. Their methods had been adapted to address various forms of trauma, from personal family conflicts to the healing of historical wounds between communities. Luna paused in her painting, turning to face her family. "Ms. Rodriguez told us about the early days in history class today," she said, referring to the Institute's required course on the origins of their healing methodology. "About how Mom exposed the truth at that business meeting and how it changed everything." "What did you think about that?" Alicia asked gently, always curious about her daughter's perspective on their family story. Luna considered for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "I think it was brave, but also kind of sad. Like it had to happen that way, because people weren't honest in the beginning. That's why I like what we do now better, helping people tell their truth before it becomes too painful." Her insight touched them all. The Institute's preventive programs, working with families to address conflicts and trauma before they festered, had become as important as their healing work. Luna had grown up watching this evolution, absorbing its lessons along with her mother's milk. The afternoon light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the studio floor. Rose watched them dance, reminded of the shadows in Xanthi's paintings that had always seemed to reach towards something just beyond the frame. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about adding a new wing to the Institute, a space dedicated specifically to working with children, helping them understand and express their emotions through art before they learn to hide them." "The Lunar Wing," Xanthi suggested, making her granddaughter beam with pride. "For children of all ages who need to know they're not alone," Alicia added, thinking of her own journey. Luna returned to her painting, adding subtle touches that seemed to make the portrait come alive. Her ability to capture not just appearances, but essences, had already marked her as a prodigy, though her family was careful to let her develop at her own pace. As evening approached, they were joined by Marcus White, who had flown in from London for the Institute 20th anniversary celebration. Now, A distinguished art therapist and educator, he had become an integral part of their extended family, his own journey of healing and growth, adding another layer to their collective story. "Mom sends her love," he told them, referring to Miranda, who had found her own path to redemption over the years. "She's doing wonderful work with our senior programs in New York, helping people heal family rifts before it's too late." They gathered on the studio's balcony to watch the sunset, a family tradition that had begun in those early days of reconciliation. Miami spread out before them, a city transformed by their vision of healing through art. The Divine Institute's campuses dotted the landscape, their distinctive architecture blending artistic beauty with spaces designed for healing. "Sometimes I wonder," Xanthi mused, "what would have happened if Rose had made different choices all those years ago, if he had been brave enough to choose love over appearance back then." "We might have had an easier path," Rose acknowledged, "but would we have touched as many lives? Would we have understood the depth of healing that's possible when you transform pain into purpose?" Luna, who had brought her sketchbook onto the balcony, looked up from her drawing. "I think everything happened the way it needed to. Like in art, sometimes you have to make mistakes to create something beautiful." Her words carried the simple wisdom of a child raised in an environment of healing and truth. She had grown up watching people transform their pain into paintings, their trauma into sculpture, their grief into gardens of hope. As night fell over Miami, the lights of the Divine Institute's campuses created a constellation of hope across the city. In studios and workshops around the world, people continued to discover the healing power of creative expression, their individual stories becoming part of the larger tapestry that had begun with one family's journey from betrayal to redemption. Rose reached for Xanthi's hand, a gesture that had become natural over the years, representing not romantic love rekindled, but something perhaps more valuable: deep understanding, shared purpose, and the joy of watching their legacy flourish through generations. Alicia wrapped an arm around Luna, who was still sketching, capturing this moment in quick, sure strokes. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Luna held up her sketchbook, showing a scene that took their breath away. She had drawn them all as they were now, but with shadowy figures behind them, younger versions of themselves, stretching back through time to that first meeting in the cafe. Yet the shadows weren't dark or heavy. They seemed to glow, as if lit from within by the love and healing that had transformed their story. "I'm calling it Forever Echo," Luna explained, "because love doesn't just echo through time, it changes everything it touches, making it more beautiful." As they stood together under the Miami stars, 4 generations united by art, truth, and the endless possibility of healing, they understood that their story would continue to echo through time, touching lives they would never know, inspiring healing they would never witness, creating ripples of hope that would spread far beyond their own horizons. The Divine Institute stood as a testament to the power of truth to heal, of art to transform, and of love to endure beyond betrayal and pain. But perhaps their greatest legacy was not in the buildings that bore their names or the programs that carried their methods around the world, but in the simple truth that Luna had captured in her drawing, that love, like art, has the power to transform everything it touches, creating beauty from pain, hope from despair, and healing from the deepest wounds of the heart. Dear ladies, the story of Xanthi and Alicia teaches us profound lessons about strength, resilience, and the power within every woman. Never let someone else's choices define your worth. When Xanthi was abandoned at her most vulnerable moment, young, pregnant, and alone, she didn't let that betrayal break her spirit. Instead, she channeled her pain into creativity and purpose, building a beautiful life for herself and her daughter. Your age doesn't determine your strength. At just 18, Xanthi faced what many would consider impossible odds. Instead of giving up, she worked multiple jobs, pursued her education, and never stopped creating art. She proved that you're never too young to be strong and never too wounded to heal. Transform your pain into purpose. Both mother and daughter took their personal tragedy and turned it into a movement that helped thousands of others heal. Your struggles can become the foundation of something beautiful that helps others overcome similar challenges. Your worth isn't measured by someone else's validation. When Rose rejected Xanthi, she didn't accept his money or depend on his approval. She built her own success, proving that a woman's value comes from within, not from any man's recognition. Being a single mother isn't a limitation. It's a demonstration of incredible strength. Xanthi showed that single motherhood, while challenging, can be a journey of empowerment. She raised Elysia to be confident, capable, and compassionate, proving that one strong woman can raise another. Don't let betrayal harden your heart. Through all their struggles, both Xanthi and Elysia maintained their capacity to love and create beauty. They showed that staying soft in a hard world isn't weakness, it's incredible strength. Trust in your journey. Each step of your path, even the painful ones, can lead you to your purpose. Xanthi's struggle as a young single mother led to creating spaces for healing through art. Elysia's journey of discovering her father's identity led to helping others find their truth. Your story matters. Every woman's journey, with all its challenges and triumphs, has the power to inspire others. Never underestimate how your courage in facing life's challenges can light the way for others. Remember, like Xanthi and Elysia, you have the power to turn rejection into redirection, transform pain into purpose, use your creativity as a healing force, stand strong in your truth, create your own success story. Help others through your experiences. Build a legacy that inspires generations. You are not defined by those who leave, but by the strength you find in rising above their absence. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see your value. Like these remarkable women, you have the power to write your own story, create your own success, and turn your challenges into triumph. Own your truth. Embrace your journey, and never forget that within you lies the strength to overcome any obstacle and create something beautiful from life's greatest challenges. With love and solidarity from the heart of shattered trust. This story reminds us that every woman has within her the power to rise above adversity, create positive change, and build a legacy that inspires others. Your journey, no matter how difficult, can become a light that guides others toward healing and hope.